What's up, everybody? Welcome to Between Rounds. I'm here, joined by ZP, and today we're going to be going over the most recent Deadlock Fight Night in Europe.
That's right. A lot of changes already where, teams, Jake, they had a little bit of time to marinate on the big changes to the game with 3 lanes and some of the balance changes that came about with it. And look, to say it's caused a seismic shift and how some teams are performing would be a big understatement.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, coming into this new map, there's just so many changes all at once. You can't fully adapt to them all. And it's been a learning process over these last few weeks, which is, I think, one of the most fun parts about watching Deadlock right now is, learning with the professional teams as they play, as they innovate, and trying to, take what they can execute in their play, in their professional matches, and potentially bring it to some of my own when I hop on and play Deadlock. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the review. First, we can take a look at the draft. Our challengers this week were One Win Team and Parivision. I think most people would have called Parivision the favorite here in this match with probably a little bit better results historically. However, One Win Team have continued to be successful recently and have been impressive on this new patch. So draft super tanky for Parivision, I'd say, thinking about Abrams and Shiv, supported by the Kelvin. Whereas One Win Team more focused on the pickoff with Bebop, Calico, Paradox, and then these very scary late game heroes in Yamato and Seven.
Yeah, I think you look at Parivision, and Parivision was definitely a draft that was more reminiscent of the historical EU drafts, right? Where you focus more on a strong front line, and then you have 1 or 2 heroes more on the carry end, specifically Wraith, that will bring you on through. And, that worked out really well for EU for a long time, is what Virtus.pro used to run a lot also. But I think things have changed a little bit, especially with the ideas that, how you allocate your economy to your hero specifically, as we'll get into in this match. It's changed a little bit, which really does sort of change how you want to play the early, the mid game, and who you want to bring you into the late game and beyond.
Yeah, we can just jump right into the review. Starting off, One Win Team had a pretty effective mid lane. They were able to get a pretty early Guardian takedown after getting a few kills with the help of Bebop. And so you can see, with that laser, they're able to clean up, open up this first Guardian in the mid, and that really frees up the Bebop specifically to get active and gank while Yamato can start farming.
I think Jason had an observation on this when we were watching it. I think per his stats, that may have been the earliest middle Guardian take, or Guardian take period, that we've ever seen, not even just middle. So the fact that the middle Guardian got pushed so early in this game was a big testament to just One Win, highly focusing on opening up the middle lane for farm for the rest of the game.
Yeah, and then we saw, a bit more rotations coming out of that mid lane with Bebop getting active. One Win Team were really trying to press their advantage, really trying to take it, especially to this Shiv and Kelvin lane, which was probably the strongest lane for One Win Team, or rather for Parivision in the game, where Shiv and Kelvin were kind of bullying. So they brought the Bebop in, they tried to commit, replicate some of their success on that mid Guardian, but the counter gank came in, so Parivision was able to hold on to this, and I think this really started to stabilize the early game that was getting a little bit out of control. Bebop got shut down. You can see all these picks coming for Parivision as they, bring the numbers to the strong lane. I think that was really well played at this point in the early game.
I think it's also important to note while we're in the early clips here that I think the goal of Bebop for One Win was that they really wanted to use Bebop as kind of the early, the mid-game bruiser, right? Something that would create a lot of chaos, create a lot of space, because they didn't really have a larger game plan of having ABL be involved in the early fights, right? They just wanted to use the fact that Bebop could rotate and be a menace and kind of use Bebop's early game power to create a ramp for a later game edge.
Yeah, and Yamato was really able to capitalize that. The game was, quiet for a little while, but there comes a big moment where Parivision, the Urn is being pressured by One Win Team. They're bringing it over to this side of the map, and Parivision make the call to allow this Urn turn-in to go through, and they try to push 2 other walkers elsewhere on the map. They try to push both mid and the side lane. And so One Win Team, of course, they turn in the Urn themselves. They start pushing their own walker down. And crucially, at the same time, these pushes elsewhere on the map from Parivision kind of fall flat. They're not able to get either of the walkers they tried to, and they lose a walker. So this is One Win Team, I felt, took a really big advantage at this moment in the game, able to secure multiple objectives and not really losing anything for it.
I think one thing that's worth noting with the new map is that I think it's harder to do earn for walker trades the way it was in the past. I think there's way more of a world where the walkers, just because they're more durable and there's less to defend, that the other team is still going to be able to rotate in time to save the walker and get the earn at the same time. It's not as simple of a trade as it used to be.
Yeah, so this team fight was pretty big for One Win Team. They're continuing to push the map, push their advantage. We can jump to the next clip, though, and we'll see that In this fight, this is a crucial fight. It's a start catch here from the Paradox onto the Abrams, and Abrams tries to turn this fight around, tries to turn and burst the Yamato, but of course at this point Yamato has really gotten farmed, has really been juggling a lot, and then Abrams realized he's bitten off quite a bit more than he can chew. One Win Team bring the numbers, and you can see here, even with the Kelvin ulti, Yamato is brawling it out in here, still being super effective in this engagement, and One Win Team are pretty much going to rout Parivision.
You look at where the game state is right now in terms of ABL's farm, and it doesn't get any better for Parivision from this point forward. Like, ABL just uses the farm to eat the jungle even more effectively and just continues building this lead where, it's the evolving story here is like where ABL goes from this point on.
Yeah, exactly. He ends up being a really key player in this game, and this first Rejuve take really sets One Win up for some more success in the future. They're going to be able to defeat the mid boss pretty quickly, grab the Rejuve uncontested. This Rejuve, though, it's not quite the dominant lead that One Win Team are hoping for. We can go to the next clip and see that Parivision are actually going to try to make a sidewalker defense here. Shiv tanks everybody, defends the tower, and it's able to successfully turn this fight around that One Win Team are really trying to pressure here. So Shiv's actually going to not only chase them out, defend the walker, but also get some key cleanup kills, which really stabilizes the game a little bit for Parivision. But what you might be able to see here on the minimap is that in this fight, Seven is also splitting and is able to grab the mid walker. So although this is a really good fight for Parivision, they do still lose that crucial mid walker objective, which allows One Win Team to still progress their lead, although maybe not as strongly as they would have hoped.
Yeah, and I think you're okay taking trades like that into the later game, just because, as you saw from earlier, right, where Parivision tried to trade Earn for walkers, getting walkers is more of an investment in general. So even if you give up some kills to get a walker, generally speaking, it's a worthwhile trade now, especially in how the new 3-lane map plays out.
Yeah, we can jump to the next clip, and the game slows down a bit for the next Rejuve, though. One Win Team are actually going to force this Rejuve just because Parivision are showing on the map with an Earn. So with no pickoffs, with no ultis forces, normally I would call this like a super risky play, but One Win Team had a great read on this timing, like knowing that Kelvin had the Earn, he was too far away to come contest. They've got Stormcloud, and everyone's here to help secure the Rejuve. So the second Rejuve also goes their way. Parivision still brought numbers to this fight, and I believe, due to using some of these key ults, Parivision are able to get crucial kills in shutting down the Yamato, and I think finding one more here as well, which is good for them. But once again, like One Win Team, they managed to get away without losing their whole team, without getting really crushed in a team wipe, and they do still grab the Rejuve in the end, so these deaths aren't the most impactful.
I think the other thing where things were really grim for Parivision at this point too is that you look at the overall farm, while on the aggregate Parivision wasn't that far behind, you look at where ABL was at, and yeah, even though Play With Me was still a threat on the Wraith, I don't think there's any bigger threat in the game really than a super overfarmed Yamato. It's just too good at dictating the pace of fights, and it's kind of what we saw from here on out, where ABL was able to just go in without really worrying about much. There wasn't much that could directly kill ABL, especially because at this point, the golden statue farm from all the sinner sacrifices that ABL was hitting was pretty big. We mathed it out afterwards. It worked out to being around like a 15 to 20% increase in overall stats, which is just ridiculous at this point in the game.
Yeah, I think like these changes to the sinner sacrifices have allowed teams to like pump all the farm onto one main carry, and I mean Yamato I think is a perfect hero for exactly that purpose. And you can't really focus fire her in the late game with that ultimate. You kind of have to let her deal her damage, and when it's amped by 15-20%, that's pretty ridiculous when you get item capped in the late game. We can jump to the next timestamp though and look at a pick off that One Win are able to find. They're able to catch the Kelvin, and although it's just the Kelvin and the support, that's a really crucial pick off in this team comp, because Parivision, they're all about tanking up, trying to heal through the damage, but without Kelvin, they're missing that key ability to turn around the fights and shut things down. So One Win Team, with that pickoff, they snowball in, they're able to shut down the Abrams, and they're able to put a lot of pressure on the base. But Parivision honestly continued to fight really well despite a difficult scenario. They're able to get some counter kills, and although the shrines are going to drop here, One Win Team are not going to be able to get the patron knock, pretty importantly, and a few kills do come through on the chase down for Parivision. So Shiv ends up really, once again, I think being pretty crucial in some of these big defenses, able to turn fights around, able to chase One Win out of the base, even with the net worth lead that One Win Team have been able to accumulate. That full rage Shiv is, pretty potent in these situations. So you got to give props to Parivision for how well they played from behind, even in these difficult moments in the series.
Yeah, and a lot of that, I mean, together made it work on the Shiv, even while not being an over-farm Shiv. Still kind of shows how in a fight that goes like kind of for a longer period of time, Shiv can be the ultimate cleanup even when you're a bit behind. And I mean, Play With Me was still a threat the entire way through. Got very farmed on the Wraith. I do think that this game, though, is like another testament to the idea of when you're looking at your true late game carry potential, right now there's almost nothing better than Yamato, right? Because like Wraith is usually one of the absolute best. I mean, you see clips here as Play With Me, helped keep Parivision in it, but it wasn't enough in the end.
Yeah, and I mean, this right here, we're already into the next clip here, which is perfect because Yamato is essentially 1v3, 1v4 here, and he just doubles down and like commits to the fight, and Seven comes in off the respawn to help as well. But it's pretty ridiculous to see at this phase of the game, even in a 3v1, 4v1 scenario, one team aren't really able to be, or rather Parivision aren't able to be aggressive and dive onto the Yamato. They do chase a little bit more here, but Seven shows up with the metal skin, and Yamato as well is going to come into this fight. And despite a huge numbers disadvantage, this ends up still being a really important defense for one win team with Yamato pure 1v3 right now. And it's Parivision who's backing off here in the pure 1v3. So showing, I think, what Yamato can do right now in this meta, definitely looking like a hero we're going to have to take a look at in our new tier list.
You just love to think about the Cubs. It's like, okay, we can take her. No, we can't take her. Yamato got hands. Like,
we're 1v3, guys. It's fine. Don't worry. She doesn't have ult. Oh, she's still stronger than us. That's pretty scary.
Yeah.
We could jump to the next clip. So one win team, pretty huge advantage here. They've got a few pickoffs. They're so strong on the map right now, and they just take it to the mid boss. Able to force it here. And then this ends up being, Parivision knows, I think, how desperate the game is at this scenario. If they give up one more rejuve with the place this Yamato is at in the game, it's just going to be too much. So they try to make the defense. They try to get in here and mess with the mid boss take, but that's a nice hook from overseas. And able to chase down the Wraith after the TP. ABL is just going to sit here and solo the mid boss down while his team chases down some more kills. And, this is essentially the crucial team fight of the game. We can jump to the next clip. So with Rejuve, one win team are going to push the patron down. And I think at this point in the game, it's just too little too late trying to defend. And even though Parivision are up, essentially one win are just going to force the patron dive in. And it's just overwhelming with 7 ult over the top. With Yamato getting in there, attacking the patron. It's just overwhelming stats, really, at this point from one win.
Yeah, and again, I think how one win played this was really, really good because as you go through the clips, you kind of look at where they're at. They just made this conscious decision, right, of ABL, you will farm in the early to mid game. We're going to let our Paradox, we're going to let our Bebop and Calico be the prime lifters and do a lot of the early game fighting, basically preventing the objective control from getting too out of hand, like not letting Parivision get too much done in the way of pushing, even when they're trying to do things like earn trading. And, just let ABL build into an absolute beast into the late game. And I think it's a more nuanced way of building in Deadlock than we've even seen in the past, of the idea of this is going to be our harder carry and we are going to give you the room to do all of this. And, teams have sort of done it a little bit in the past, but it feels way more pronounced in a 3-lane map.
Yeah, and I think the Sinner Sacrifice changes, letting you get that triple golden statue buff from the last hit on the Sinner Sacrifice means that you can really pump some of those smaller stat buffs all into one person, the more vaults they take. And so I think vaults have become now this key way to, keep all the farm on one player. And somebody like Yamato is really a great user for that. You could think about putting that same level of farm on another character like a Wraith that is also a potent late game carry, but Wraith is still a little bit more vulnerable to being focus fired. Like in the end, you can still stun control her and lock her down, and she's not going to be able to leverage those stats. But I think this game from one win was a great use of Yamato and a great strategic play, especially with how well the mid lane went. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Overseas on the Bebop for having such a dominant mid lane that allows Yamato to get started on the snowball super early. So definitely a big win for one win. I think it's they're underdogs in this game. They're able to get it done pretty convincing with all 3 rejuve takes in the game, and great strategic play, tactical movement across the map.
Yeah, and I think too, one trend of Deadlock that's kind of been pretty consistent from beginning to end right now has just been the entire idea of how an overfed frontliner usually has more impact on the game than even like a super fed carry hero. Where, I mean, don't get me wrong, we've seen things like Infernus have metas where Infernus is just absolutely unkillable, but overall it is just awful for the other team if you have to deal with an overfed Yamato, or at times where Warden has been more meta, like an overfed Warden. Frontliners have this way of being, not only will they damage you down, but you have no way of killing them even with like a numbers advantage. And it's one of the things you have to keep a check on, if at all possible, when you're kind of evaluating the economy as the game progresses. Well, that was our first match for the challenging teams, but of course that leads into the money match, which right now is truly the death battle for the team that gets through, Jake, because it's who gets to play against Virtus.pro, which is almost going on a Hydra Nation level run right now in EU, which we actually haven't seen before. EU historically has had a lot of parity in Deadlock, but Virtus.pro is kind of on a brand new, like, true champion streak. But hey, one win, a rising team, able to beat out Parivision, who was made of the former number 2 and number 3 teams in the past. It's still an interesting story, but man, Virtus.pro gave them all they could handle and more.
Yeah, let's jump into the clips. I mean, the start of this game was actually very competitive on game one, with one win and VP trading farm for quite a while, and neither team able to generate a very significant advantage here. We can just take a look at some of the drafts. You get to see a little bit of the hero priority. VP really loving to get Mikhails on the Vindicta. That's like a key part of their strategy. They were able to get it through both times. The rest of the draft's pretty open, but I think that was a key element that VP super prioritized. This has been like a lane pairing with especially the first game with the Bebop in mid, that they really wanted to emphasize. They really wanted to play around.
Well, the interesting thing to me too about the 1-win draft in game one is the fact that they got both Paradox and Holiday and Pocket. That was a triple playmaker lineup. Usually when you think about hero pools and what teams play, right, it'll be one player that's your kind of do it all Paradox, Holiday, Pocket player. And they were running all three at the same time, which, I mean, it makes sense when you're trying to go for a strategy of early to mid-game lane dominance, because probably the number one thing that's changed in Deadlock over the last patch is just the fact that you can't get help as easily if you're losing your lane. So teams, I think, right now are still kind of going inherently to this idea of what can we do to not lose the lane, because you just can't get bailed out the same way you were in the 4-lane game.
Yeah, I think it was huge, especially in the first game, and minus both games, that VP are able to grab the Kelvin for Obakam, who is just so consistent and strong on the Kelvin, so comfortable. And I think Kelvin generally is kind of the top support right now, huge difference maker in some of these team fights. They're also able to grab the Wraith as the last pick here. But here we can see our first clip. I mean, it's pretty deep into the game already, but mostly a farm trade up to this point. And here's where, teams really start to commit for these walkers, really looking for key objectives. And this is one team able to catch Obakam's Kelvin here on the side lane, but it takes so long to get the kill. While that's happening across the map, VP are pushing down a walker of their own. They're getting a kill of their own. And so objectively, this ends up being a good trade for VP, that they're able to open up that walker and fall back.
I find it funny that no matter who VP plays against, it feels like Obakam is always the number one gank target, regardless of what is going on. Like, Obakam is just target number one. I mean, part of that may be playing both the Ivy and the Kelvin, but it just always seems to work out that way, Jake.
Yeah, and here we're able to see that the 1-win were able to grab a mid walker as well. So they ultimately even up the trade in terms of walkers. Both teams open up that second flex slot. So still at this point, I'd say the game is extremely close. We can jump into the next clip though and see something that ends up being a key factor for VP this game is the way they're able to kite the initial engagements. As we'll see in a moment on the other side of the map. Yeah, so there's a catch here coming in for VP. They initiate, and then 1-win team immediately bring numbers. They show up with the Pocket ult, the Infernus ult, 7 ult over the top as well, and they're just completely zoning off this side of the map. And as you mentioned, ZP, Obakam's kind of like the one man just trying to hold it down in that death zone, but the rest of VP are able to, fall back. They're waiting it out. 7 ult zoning for quite a while. They do get the Kelvin pick, but in the end, VP, the rest of the players were able to stay alive, stay healthy. And 1-win team thought they could push an advantage here, but really they couldn't. VP was very ready for the counter engage. They came in off the TP, and it ends up being a huge team fight for them, that they're able to back out from those big ultimates and re-engage. I think is a testament to VP's awareness of the game, their willingness, even though they're down, 1-2 players there, they know that they have the ability advantage and they go for the refight.
I feel like in any game with that kind of follows like hero shooter dynamics, which Deadlock does to an extent, like one of the biggest hallmarks of a team that's playing at the highest level, it's not just winning fights, it's knowing which fights you cannot immediately win and how you disengage, right? Like the disengage calls being on point for VP is super, super notable and something that is a mark of, I feel like, any good team in any game, truthfully.
Yeah, and off this big team fight, they're able to grab the rejuve. They've got Earn here as well. 1-win team are like trying to wrap walkers at this exact moment, but VP are just going right back into the fight. They're going to run it straight to these walker defenses and show up and turn things around. So I think 1-win team are really trying to just push the tempo and try and like punish even after losing a team fight. Thought they could maybe, get an objective, but VP were very on the ball with like being right back out on the map. They killed the mid boss so incredibly quickly with their DPS, and then they're just roaming around, killing people on both the side lanes. The one win team, they're pushing the other walker down, but still VP players are showing up. They're continuing to fight this, and they're really just not giving up anything for free. And I think this ended up being kind of a crumbling for one win, as VP are just like chasing them around the map, kill after kill after kill. On top of that, they've got the rejuve on, and this is a moment where I think the lead really expanded for VP.
And not only that, but I also think one win, by playing like a triple playmaker style composition, they kind of pigeonholed themselves into the idea that they needed to at least be like 10k ahead at this point rather than being 10k behind. Just because in terms of overall game scaling, you look at the comp VP is running that's a little bit tankier, and yeah, there's Seven and Infernus on the other team, but I feel like the late game scaling for Virtus.pro is like way better here too. So like one win's like win condition here, I think really relied on never really giving up the lead the way they did. Because once you're at this point, 13k behind, I just don't think they had a ton of plays to come back in the game. Like even with a Holiday and a Paradox, they still would have had to have like gotten a clean pick off before any given fight, I think, to have had a shot at some of these later game team fights.
Yeah, they got a little greedy here, though, with the advantage. They tried to, keep pressing the lead with the rejuve, but even though they had a couple players farming elsewhere. And so D-Mob gets caught on the Bebop, gets shut down. They do take the mid-walker here. They eventually get it done, but it ends up costing them a bunch of their rejuve respawns, and it's a nice cleanup for one win team, something to put some wind in their sails. Nonetheless, though, just rejuve death, so VP are going to be able to get back on the map pretty quickly. One win team, though, they really, I think, like you were saying, ZP, they really felt a little bit desperate at this point with running more of an early game comp, wanting to continue to snowball and just like catch any chance they get to get the lead back in their favor. They are pretty much right now actually going to be just running straight at Zergy, who's trying to clear some camps. So Kelvin's here clearing the wave. They hear, though, yeah, you can see the pockets pinging it out. He's hearing Zergy's doing this Sinner sacrifice, which is a little greedy, but the team's respawns are coming in super quick. So Zergy is going to get caught here. Trying to get away off the Sinner sacrifice is not going to work. However, the team's right behind him. VP like doubling down, recommitting, and they know there's a huge bag on the line right now. So they're going to just turn this into a total chase down.
Yeah, this turned into just a full-on sequence of, wait, get the bag. It's Bebop here, I think, that comes in and like hooks off the TP, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
these guys are playing Payday 2 right now, trying to steal. Look at this beach ball, 1400 bag. It's a nice pickup for Mikhails.
Yeah, that was a great moment. And God, I mean, you think about also how this game panned out. I'm gonna say this when it comes to the Kelvin pick. I feel like if you want to secure your late game in Deadlock right now, you have Kelvin. He's Mr. Late Game. Like, it's so difficult to play against Kelvin if it's remotely even and you have to play around Shelter when you look at how some of these team fights went on in the late game.
Yeah, and I just feel like Kelvin always hits these insane healing numbers where, like, just throughout the course of the match, he's able to do so much. And that doesn't even take into account all the slowing and zoning that his skills offer, keeping the enemy team off your back. So we can just jump to the next clip right now. So VP able to just, like, pretty much farm a huge lead, to this point in the game. They're really patient with their lead. They didn't like force it to try to end the game. They just continued to like pressure objective after objective, doing a lot of camps here and there. They were able to disengage one time at this urn, and then they come back in with no 7 ult. They're able to capture the urn, and this is just a team fight that, once again, VP take it on their own terms. They're in control of the situation, and they're able to fight it out super well.
Yeah, and when you have this big of a difference between both teams, I mean, this just becomes... The win conditions for one win at this point got so minimal, right? They basically need either a perfect Paradox swap or a perfect lasso, and VP just wasn't giving them the opportunity. And they were, at this point, they played the macro game well enough that, paths of even pushing or, creating those opportunities were just very small for one win. And, oh, man, that charge was great.
Yeah, this was a sick catch by the Abrams. And, Abrams, I think, was pretty much a mainstay all DFN. It was, being super impactful. They do Holiday Lasso him into the spawn, but the rest of VP is just right into the mid boss. They're, full objective gaming, not worried about losing an Abrams here or there. And they've got, this Wraith has pretty monstrous damage at this phase of the game. Mid boss pretty tanky now with that change where it does continue to scale up in HP, but there's just overwhelming damage from VP, from Mikhails and Zergy at this point. They're so farmed. So they're able to get essentially another free rejuve. And then this is more or less the game. There's a final push here from VP that we can jump to, but the advantage is so huge when they finally are here pushing the Patron. They go for an aggressive urn turn in. They even farm for most of that rejuve. To be fair, they kept making the lead bigger, showing that VP is just a really tactical team. But they start by grabbing the urn. And 7, looks like it's going pretty well with the ulti, but gets comboed down by Mo Krill. And VP, they all get so low, but they just manage the pressure really well in this fight.
I love how that's a trend in general, where things feel pretty good in Deadlock in general before the Mo just starts raining the fists on you. Classic versus Mo and Krill experience.
Yeah, this was crazy too from Abrams. Like, he's so low and he's just tanking everything here. It's pretty ridiculous. Interesting seeing like the heavy spirit build this game for Abrams. Usually I think in the past it was like more gun oriented. So Listic got a ton done here on the Abrams. I think he was a huge factor in the team's success. And at this point, the game's just out of control. It's more of a formality. Even with knocking the patron, these one-man players still going to be on 20-second respawns for the most part. So it's more or less a free game for VP at this phase. They've done enough here. And I just think VP is they're on such a high level with how tactical they are at closing out these games. Like, these final fights are rarely competitive for VP because they've just put the game in such a position that there's just not much you can do to fight back. Like, they don't take these risky patron dives and trying to like end the game early. They create an insurmountable advantage and then close it out. And honestly, that's kind of the mindset you need to have to be champion here in Deadlock Fight Night.
And it's something that VP has always done really, really well. When you think about how they've managed their in-game leadership, is that even back to their Buff Enjoyers days, right? The thing we commended them on going all the way back to like Deadlock Fight Night #1 was that this was a team that just had better macro understanding. And I think it's really helped them a lot into the new map, which is a map that I think you do have to think about more, right? You have to actually consider the macro game even more so than the 4-lane map, because the decisions are more impactful and the fights generally, you have to do a little bit more to get objectives relative to the days of maybe one person will just solo push down a walker, right? So yeah, I mean, VP's strengths only got stronger in this new patch.
Yeah, absolutely. We could jump into game 2. Started off, we already took a look at the draft, so let's just jump into the first clip here. VP, I think they really like built even more confidence off of that win, and then the aggression. I think this is kind of a theme for VP. As much as they play super tactically in the opening match, I often feel that their second games, they're very aggressive. They're really pushing the tempo. Listic is on the Geist this game, so it's kind of a perfect hero to like level up that lane aggression and really take it to the opponents. And with the Kelvin behind him as well, they really put a lot of resources priority into Listic, who I think was a very key player for VP in this match.
Also worth a note here is that one win did get the Sinclair. Sinclair has generally been on permaban status, actually came out in this game. And look, I don't think one win had issues this game because of the Sinclair, but it also kind of shows that while Sinclair is good, and while a lot of players and teams would prefer not to play against him because of the matchup issues he provides, he's not so broken that it's get Sinclair win game. It is kind of where he's at right now.
Yeah, I think like the key factor that Sinclair was able to go for this game is like, and what the reason I think he's so high prio'd is, I mean, we were talking about it previously, is I was focusing on like the laning, some of the value that he can provide in those early game situations, and also some of the value from the ultimate. But I felt like in the late game, one of the things I always saw is that Sinclair puts his clone safely out of the fight, and then goes all in, super heavy commits with everything, trying to get kills, and like can be a super heavy damage build. And then he just TPs out if he's gonna die. So like what that allows him to do is just be completely ridiculously aggressive, where normally you would just easily be traded after you get a kill. It wouldn't really be worth it if you were farmed on Sinclair. That was, I think, the key play style that makes Sinclair so strong in the late game. So if anyone's playing it at home and wants to leverage it, I think it's all about that heavy damage build, going super hard for kills, and then just TPing out with a clone you prepared, using it like a recall.
Yeah, I mean, he's a very slippery hero that also can just have unexpected adaptations, right? Like what we've seen him at times in lanes versus a Great Talon, and all of a sudden he copies the owl and then sends the owl after you. It's like, it's just not something you mentally prepare for, just the options he has on top of the fact that, he may be one of the most evasive heroes in the game, but still not unbeatable.
Yeah, definitely. We can jump to the next clip. So Mikhails was, fighting in this mid lane. Vindicta got chased down here nearly by Sinclair with a copied ultimate, but he's able to like circle juke around this new geometry in the mid, dance out super well. And yeah, Sinclair got too low, got forced to back off. VP brought numbers to the mid really for this fight to keep him alive. And that allows them to, show up now and continue to keep the pressure on. So you'll see an immediate tower dive from Listic. He's going all the way to the back line, catches Sinclair after the TP. Bebop's like 1 HP, really can't come into this. And VP are gonna, keep the aggression on here in the mid lane for quite a while, actually, like continuing that heavy pace of aggression. They're farming the side lanes well, but they're continuing to disrespect really this Guardian and keep attacking even with some relatively low health bars. So, I mean, VP just clearly had a serious increase in their aggression here on game 2.
Well, also, I think this game too is like kind of an interesting parallel to our very first match in the challenging side, where one win won in part because they dominated middle, right? They got the early middle lane and were able to control jungle and everything from there. Well, it was kind of the reverse in this game where VP decided, no, we're going to make middle our priority, and one win doesn't even get a chance to kind of do a farm setup for someone like ABL or Empty Dreams the way that they would have liked to.
Yeah, so kills kind of coming here across the map for VP. We can jump to the next clip though. And we'll see, yeah, Kelvin was here trying to sneak the vault and steal it for himself. So it's a nice catch for one win that they're able to grab him and shut that down, get the bag back. So one win team, you know, we're still fighting pretty impressively in this game. Like they weren't getting run over by any means. But I think one of the things that characteristic of VP is when they lose a couple players around the map, they're really good at stopping the bleeding. Like they don't lose like the rest of their team, where in the last game I felt like VP in some moments was able to really run from fight to fight, just constantly cleaning up one win, denying them farm, stealing bags from them, where VP, when they did get caught in some of these risky moves, they were able to slow the game down, reset it super effectively.
There's something to be said for the dynamic of there's losing and then there's losing well. And when even when VP is losing, you know, they, as you say, they stem the bleeding, right? They don't throw good money after bad. They don't go, oh, let's try and win this fight no matter what, and then, you know, lose 5 players instead of just 2, right? They're just kind of a, hey, we've lost. What is our next best optimal move?
Yeah, so we can, you know, the 7 was punished here, but VP actually, you know, bring pretty significant numbers. They're able to make the defense. We can go to the next clip though, and we see VP actually bring 5 here to an enemy 4-man here, so they have an advantage in this team fight. Dmov goes super deep here on the holiday, gets comboed, but the rest of the team is right behind him. They're really ready for the catch, and they were ready even for the combo punish. So the rest of the squad is here. They're able to shove away one-win team, and that's continuing this tactical advantage. So as much as, you know, across the map, one-win team are pushing down towers, VP are also able to make the defense there. So they're able to win not only where the team fight started, but also able to show up, help Zergy on that walker, and defend elsewhere. And I think that's something that VP just does better than anybody else, maybe in the world right now, is their ability to win multiple fights across the map. They're not all in on one position, all in on one engagement. They're distributing their resources perfectly, and you know, they basically get a team wipe here across the map, you know, only Bebop left standing. And that's just so ridiculously impactful. So hard to do, frankly, in Deadlock right now, to have clean fights taking place multiple places simultaneously. Really impressive from VP.
It's also something you have to do too if you want to like maintain objective and macro control the way that VP does, right? Is that if you decide, oh, we want to play a fight safely, and you overcommit too many people to win a fight, sure, you might win the fight, but then that's where you get like inefficient trades on your base objectives the other way, right? And it's just, as you say, I think VP's kind of hit the point of where they've min-maxed things like very, very well. And I mean, you look at this game right now, overall, it's now manifested at 15 minutes into a reasonable lead, but it feels like you don't feel the impacts of some of their decisions until, 5 to 10 minutes later, even reflected as far as like soul economy goes.
Yeah, and we could just keep running it here because once again, Dmov going in, looking for the lasso, gets comboed. You think he's going to get shut down, but no, the team is right behind him. And that's been a consistent theme, like where some teams have been punished, I think, for this holiday and hasn't looked so effective. It's been shut down on the dives. VP are just so ready to assist. Even though their initiation kind of fails on the holiday and he's getting comboed, the rest of the squad is just there. They're immediately ready to double down on the fight. They're not too far away. And so that kind of makes it super scary to deal with something like a holiday. It's like you can't just go for the punish on her with the fear that VP might always be behind her. And VP off the back of those pickoffs, they're going straight to the mid boss, able to force it down, get the rest of the team all around. Sinclair is going to dance around here and look to make some plays, but ultimately it's just too difficult to fight at this position.
It's actually really good zoning from VP. I mean, maybe you can argue Flammable went in a little bit too early there, because like Sinclair is one of the biggest threats of stealing Rejuve with Rabbit Hex, but I think Flammable went in a little bit on the earlier side, and VP they put enough pressure that he didn't get an ideal Rabbit Hex, but they are also positioned in a way that they didn't make it easy for Flammable there either.
Yeah, it would be really desperate for him to like try to 1v5 go for it, even with the Hex, right? Because the rest of the players are there around. One went for walkers at this moment, basically instead of contesting the mid boss. But VP once again are able to repeat their success. They leave the objective they're doing currently, and they're just immediately showing up to the fight elsewhere and denying sort of the snowball pickoffs. They were able to punish the Calico here a little bit. Force her away. I think they end up catching her. Oh no, actually I remember this. She, with the Torment Pulse, knocks the B-Ball off the zip and goes warp speed to get out. It looks completely ridiculous, but that's a pretty rare knockoff zip with the Torment Pulse. definitely a unexpected situation for Overseas and the Bebop, and the Ava form is able to get them out. And once again, VP with Reju, right? They're always doubling down on these engagements.
Yeah, and again, it's at this point, it's like it's not entirely out of reach for one win, but it's where you start seeing. Personally, I think like at 16 minutes, even then you start seeing some of the ridiculousness of Kelvin's ability to secure games, right? Like Frozen Shelter highlights like that continue to happen the rest of this game, and it's just, I don't know, man. Like winning mid to late game versus Kelvin is brutal right now.
Yeah, Dimov on the next clip, we'll be able to see he's like coming here from behind. They're ready to push the Walker. He does some damage on it, and then look, finds this Mo Krill right here, trying to make a defense, trying to get it happen, but the rest of the team is there, and that immediately allows VP to start attacking this Walker. You can see it's just getting completely bursted down. I mean, one-man team, they have to go for this defense. They really feel the pressure. I mean, with how mid Walker is right now, you just can't give it up for free. But nonetheless, VP, they're ready for this. They brought numbers. They get a few more pickoffs. This ends up turning super scrappy with ABL, I think in particular, doing a great job in the great talent throughout this game, like making this defense. He's very nearly getting caught and punished here, but he's able to turn it around on the Calico, who got swapped, silenced by the time wall. He's able to find even, I believe, another pickoff here. So Virtus.pro, despite all the lead they have, the individual playmaking from one-man team is there, and they're pretty fantastic at it. So they do, not make it easy for VP, even though the lead is starting to get out of control at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of an interesting thing to bring up too in general, is that I don't think that on a mechanical level these teams are necessarily so far apart. It's just, it's the decision making from VP. I think it's part drafting, part decision making, but when you put together, it's just adding like small advantages over the course of the game to where the relative mechanical parity stops being a factor, is kind of how I see it.
Yeah, and even more pickoffs come through. I believe he's able to catch the Kelvin here. He is, but then ABL is going to make a fateful decision here on the next clip to go farm the side lane to keep the map pressure on. And you can see on the mini map, VP coming from all sides. They know that the great talent has been a critical factor in the ability for one-win team to clutch out some of these fights. And so with the lasso, with the rest of the squad showing up, they get a big pickoff onto ABL and able to take the fight elsewhere on the map and keep the pressure on.
At times,
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, it feels like you're watching a chokehold sometimes, and like how VP plays this, where just again the ability of the disengage gap fights. I mean, the fact that Listic lived there is ridiculous. Okay, Frozen Shelter comes in here. This time it wasn't enough to save Obakim, but
yeah, but it does still delay the fight enough. And like once again, VP are like, okay, you've pressed your buttons, you've pressed your skills. They bring numbers and they show up. And so even though you do get the pick off on Kelvin, VP, they just don't give anything for free. They know they have the advantage. They're willing to commit to the fight with that button advantage. And then once again, straight into the mid boss, right? Like that's the for VP, it's. You think weaker teams might give up a pick on that Kelvin and just try to reset and wait for the spawners, but because VP double down, because they show up, they force a big response out of one-win team. This time, the mid boss forces one-win to respond, right, with the roar. One-win feel like, oh, they've got to contest this. We're actually going to have a pause come in, but maybe we can skip to the end of the pause here and take a look at what happens. So one-win team feel like, oh, we've got to contest this. VP finishing the mid boss. They're willing to take the risk. Sinclair comes in, trying to take that engage. We talked about his ability to like get in and out. I think this pickoff was pretty massive, though. Wraith got absolutely crushed, and she's just a key element for the damage in this team fight. Even with the stolen 7 ult, it's just too difficult for the Sinclair to actually stay alive, to keep the engagement going. And so VP, now they finish the mid-boss once they've gotten all the kills. Pretty much a free rejuve for them.
Yeah, and at this point in the game, when you're about like 20 to 30k down and you give up rejuve, just your options for getting back into the game become so limited. It's like, yeah, you got overseas on the Bebop, but I kind of feel like, barring the rare circumstance of a Bebop getting like ultra fed, Bebop is kind of there to like give you a decent early mid game. He's usually not going to bail you out of a bad late game situation. And overall here, yeah, I mean, the fact that they were a little bit light on frontline too didn't do them any favors, especially against relatively stronger frontline with Calico, Geist, and the Kelvin. They just had limited ability to actually fight at this point in the game.
Yeah, and talking about the chokehold, VP are just so good at this. Like they never overplay their hand, even though they have a pretty massive advantage here. They just keep expanding the lead, and so we can go to the next clip. And we see a force here from one team. They see 7 farming the side lane. They realize, okay, the lead is only getting bigger against them. This is really well played from Zergy, though. He throws the stun on Mo so that the combo can't come out on it after the E shift. He's able to like dance out of this fight incredibly well. And then VP, of course, bring everyone. They have a huge net worth lead at this point in the game, and essentially one team forced to fight outside of the base with Rejuve. It looks really bad here for them. Like, it looks like, oh, this is a huge mistake fighting here. But I think this is really just how good VP is in the late game, that they're baiting this fight on the side lane. He's got the E-shift, he's got the delay. They're ready to turn it around. And yeah, you get one pick for one win, but overall, this is just an overwhelming stat check situation for VP.
Well, kind of similar to earlier in the game too, where like Kelvin got picked off, but the frozen shelter locked people in for enough time for the rest of VP to go back in. On an individual level, E-shift is kind of fulfilling the same thing in some of these fights, where even if someone dies, you've kept people locked in by virtue of them wanting to kill you for a long enough time for someone else to kill them.
Yeah, I feel like E-shift is like an MVP item in competitive play right now. Like, you see it built maybe more than any other single item, because you kind of get built on every character. The ability to delay for a couple seconds, because in these coordinated environments, those few seconds make a world of difference. The rest of your team shows up, they're able to help out. But we can see just how farm VP is. Mikhail's with a huge stake there. Catches off players trying to make the defense. They drop the patron. And I mean, the writing's on the wall at this point for one-win team. I think they already know it's pretty much over. They're going to have a couple spawners here, but the fight is really, really desperate. And Obakim's turning in the urn right now. Just, that's like so classic VP, that Kelvin's like, well, I'll just do the urn while you guys drop the patron. Just secure the game for us.
I love how it's one player stuck on that dude too. It reminds me of the NA series a while back, where like Calc just got stuck ferrying the urn no matter what. Just like, well, in this case, Obakim, you are urn guy. But yeah, needless to say, they didn't need the final urn to put it away, but it's just sticking to mechanics on principle, fundamentals of we will turn in the urn, because you never know.
Yeah, and with the way VP won this series, I think you're very much right, GP. This could easily turn into a real hot streak for them. They've won, I think this is what, 6 or 7 in a row now. And it's maybe only looking better since the new map, right? I think they're a team. We talked with the coach even in the post-game interview, and he was saying, our team already loved to fight when he came on board as coach, and he was trying to convince them, okay, we got to do a little bit more macro stuff and fight maybe a little bit less. But the map with, less lanes to have to worry about pushing, there's more room to fight. There's more heroes that can be available to show up and take engagements earlier. And I think in our map review, we talked a lot about how there's so much more farm on the map, but I think that's also a great point. There's fewer lanes on the map, which means maybe more freedom for teams like VP who want to brawl, who want to take engagements and force early objectives, early mid-boss takes.
The one thing I'll say about VP though is, at the very least, it's harder to keep the streak of excellence going, because every week you have all the teams just studying you, going, what are you doing well? Like, how do we catch up? And EU generally is a very active scrim community. So if VP can keep this up another like 2 or 3 weeks, I will be amazed, just because I think it's difficult when everyone else is trying to steal what you are good at. And it's not just on macro play too. It's the fact that you get more targeted drafts against you, where people really focus on what you're good at and try and take that away. Like, the draft plan that goes into, the #1 team is kind of ridiculous in terms of like counter plans from other teams.
Yeah, I'm kind of a VP believer, though. I think it's even, it's not that they're relying on any one hero in the drafts, as good as like the Vindicta was today, for instance. I wonder if you ban Vindicta, it feels like historically VP have just had such deep hero pools. They have so many options about how they want to approach the game, what they want to play, that yeah, you could maybe force them off of their A game into a B strategy, but even beating them on their second or third best strategy is, I think, far from an easy feat with how well they play these macro games, how much they show up to support each other in those crucial mid-game team fights. I was super impressed by VP.
That's pretty much all I got for the EU review. It's an interesting day of games, where the ending part for me, Jake, is just when I look back at it, we've already seen evolutions in 3-lane Deadlock, and I'm just excited to see what comes for our 3rd week of 3-lane Deadlock.
Yeah, me too, ZP. I think it was a really fun match to cast. I was casting on EU this week, so glad to be there, and super happy to do this review with you. That's all, folks, for this episode of Between the Rounds. Make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, and comment. Let us know what kind of segments you want to do in the future. This is our first DFN match review, but we're looking to do all sorts of different types of things and just see what the community wants, what people are interested in. So comments, let us know, like what types of things you want to see. It really helps us out, helps us creatively define the show for the future. Because we want it to be for you guys. So like, subscribe, it does really help. The show helps us grow, and we'll see you next week on Deadlock.